Alrighty, so welcome back, everyone. Today we're going to be focusing largely around assessment and all of its various ups and downs and whatnot. To start off, I thought I would show us a video. The sound isn't as important as the video itself. But I thought I'd share with you this video about falling.
The 600-meter underway. Heather Dornan in Minnesota finished second this event a year ago. She was in lane 4.
And Dornan is probably going to be your favorite. She actually won the NCAA championships in 2006 in the 800, but she only won one Big Ten championship in the 2 years.
3 laps in this event, 600 meters, 3 times around the 200-meter track here at the field house.
What a bold move by Fawn. She's looking very confident, and the Penn State runner is just running amazing today. She did win her heat in the 400, but ended up taking 4th overall.
That's Fondor moving into the lead, the sophomore from Penn State. Dornan running second.
Dornan last year scored 23 points for the Golden Gophers in their Big Ten championship, so they're really relying on getting a lot of points from her this weekend, and she's just coming by Fondor now in the home stretch, heading into the bell lap.
Dornan falling down, gets up quickly, but that's going to cost her. Lucky she wasn't injured.
Her teammate just went to the front, though, so they may be able to recover from that. And Dornan is flying down the backstretch. She is going to catch Fondor, and she may catch the leader. Wow.
She's got fun.
This is a gutsy effort by Dornan. Can she pull it off? She's moving to third. Dornan coming down the stretch from the outside. Dornan coming on strong. Dornan all the way. Dornan. Wow, unbelievable.
That is amazing. To fall in a 600. I mean, this...
So, I show that video because it's got a happy ending, but it also conveys the message that I'm trying to talk about with you right now. Specifically, I'm going to be connecting this to the lesson plans, which many of you I've sent back your feedback as well as a grade, and I'm sure many of you are not pleased with the grades because some of them were low for the course. Some of you are pleased with the grades, some of them were high. We had everything in between. As well. And I was reflecting myself as I was preparing for today about what I wanted to say about that. And at my work, where I'm teaching right now, the principal actually had a whole discussion with us, and he brings us all together, and he talks about the sandbox. He said, you know, he told me about my NTIP process. When you're in a long-term long enough, you go through a process called NTIP, the New Teachers Induction Program. And he said this process is a process you have to go through, but it's your sandbox. I chose this image because, as you see here, there are 2 different things that somebody made inside that sandbox. And you can make whatever you want with the sandbox. You can just leave it, and it can just be a big pile of sand. Or you can shape it and make it into what you want it to be. Again, tying it back to that video that we were just watching, when we learn to walk, the most common thing that happens, and that's what this image on the right represents, is we fall. Now, I'm assuming most of you don't remember learning to walk. But if you've watched children do it, how many times would you say a kid falls before they learn to walk? Is it 10 times? More or less? More. 100 times? Could be 1,000 times. And some kids never learn to walk. They have to learn other techniques and strategies in order to succeed. Walking isn't for everybody, right? Especially if you have a need that requires that walking is not in your skills that you can develop. So, but the most important thing, and why I tie it back to that video, is it's not about the fall. We tend to emphasize failure. We tend to emphasize falling. We tend to emphasize the losses. But really, learning happens when you get back up. It happens when you get back up and finish the race. There's a lovely poem that I was going to read. Let me see if I can get it out. So, like I said, this poem, it's called The Race. The author is unknown. It's one of my favorites. And it really talks about, it really hits at home to the central theme of how I view assessment and its role, and how assessment can shape your learning process. And really, I'm sharing with you my own pedagogical value in how that comes about. So it's called The Race. They all lined up, so full of hope, each thought to win the race, or tie for first, or if not that, at least take second place. And parents watched from off the side, each cheering for their son. Each one hoped to show his folks that he would be the one. The whistle blew and off they went, young hearts and hopes of fire. To win and be the hero, there was each student's desire. And one runner in particular, whose dad was in the crowd, as running near the lead and thought, my dad will be so proud. But as they speeded down the field across the shallow dip, the runner who thought to win lost his step and slipped. Trying hard to catch himself, his hands flew out to brace, and mid the laughter of the crowd, he fell flat on his face. So down he fell, and with him hope. He could not win it now. Embarrassed, sad, he only wished to disappear somehow. But as he fell, his dad stood up and showed his anxious face, which to the boy so clearly said, get up and win the race. He quickly rose, no damage done, behind a bit, that's all, and ran with all his mind and might to make up for his fall. So anxious to restore himself, to catch up and to win, his mind went faster than his legs. He slipped and fell again. He wished then he had quit, before with only one disgrace. I'm hopeless as a runner now, I shouldn't try to race. But in the laughing crowd he searched and found his father's face, that steady look which said again, get up and win the race. So he jumped up to try again, 10 yards behind the last. If I'm to gain those yards, he thought, I've got to move real fast. Exerting everything he had, he regained 8 of 10. But trying so hard to catch the lead, he slipped and fell again. Defeat. He laid there silently, a tear dropped from his eye. There's no sense running anymore. 3 strikes, I'm out. Why try? The will to rise had disappeared, all hope had fled away. So far behind, so error-prone, a loser all the way. I've lost, so what's the use, he thought. I'll live with my disgrace. But then he thought about his dad, who soon he'd have to face. Get up, an echo sounded low. Get up and take your place. You were not meant for failure here. Get up and win the race. With borrowed step, get up, he said. You haven't lost at all. For winning is no more than this, to rise each time you fall. So up he rose to run once more, and now with new commitment, he resolved that win or lose, at least he would not quit. So far behind the others now, the most he'd ever been, still he gave it all he had and ran as though to win. 3 times he'd fallen, stumbling, 3 times he rose again. Too far behind to hope to win, he still ran to the end. They cheered the winning runner as he crossed the line first place. Head high and proud and happy, no falling, no disgrace. But when the fallen youngster crossed the line last place, the crowd gave him a greater cheer for finishing the race. And even though he came in last with head bowed low, unproud, you would have thought he won the race to listen to the crowd. And to his dad, he sadly said, I didn't do so well. To me, you won, his father said, you rose each time you fell. So when your life seems dark and hard, things difficult to face, may the memory of that little boy help you in your race. For all of life is like a race with ups and downs and all you have to do to win is rise each time you fall. Okay, what I'd like you to do is take the next minute and chat with your neighbors about all these things that I've just shared with you and what impact it's having and what you think about it. Agree or disagree, it doesn't matter to me. I just want you to reflect and talk about it with your neighbors. Go ahead. So you'll get a, yeah, go ahead, please.
We were just talking about how it reminds us of the song, but I did like that.
Yeah, that is a great one.
We were thinking of, yeah.
You'll see this image here. Can anyone see why this image is special? Why I'm incorporating it into this? There's a message from this image. Okay, so I'm hearing some good chatter. What are some of the messages that you get out of this image when you look at it? Share, yeah?
Just because you're broken doesn't mean you can't stand on your own.
Yeah, that's a good one. Yep. Yeah. What was that? I missed it. What was it?
Your better days were in your past.
Okay, yeah.
You've got the framework.
You've got the framework, yes. Yep.
It's like a strong gust of wind like comes forward.
It should, it could. So this is an actual barn in the greater Essex County region. A buddy of mine was driving around and then he just saw this sign. Somebody had graffitied, "Don't Stop Believing," on this dilapidated, broken down barn, right in the middle. Somebody wrote, "Don't Stop Believing," right into the middle of that barn. So I'll relate this to my own teaching practice. There was a student I was working with yesterday, and she wanted to quit. She didn't retain the information for her test. So I sent her back, gave her time to study. She came back and just wanted to, like, "Sir, can't you just mark what I've given you and I move on? I don't want to do this." She was uncomfortable. It was, I was asking her to study and I was asking more of her than she felt comfortable giving. And 3 times she came up to my desk, and 3 times I had to keep sending her back, sadly, telling her, "I'm sorry, you don't have it quite yet. We need to work on more." So I'd provide her with some strategies. Unfortunately, she wasn't willing. She'd reached a point in her own limit where she said, I just don't want to do it. I'm done. I'm done for today. And all I kept thinking to myself, and all I kept saying to her very calmly was, "I'm ready when you are to continue. I'm ready when you are." And it really comes down to that a lot in teaching, you'll find, especially with assessment, that you're ready to show the student the next phase, but they may not be ready. And sometimes after you're doing everything you can, all you can do is wait and be ready. For that old quote, "When the student is ready, the master presents themselves." You know that one? Okay, so some comments on lesson plans themselves. You can still get 100% on the lesson plan. So anyone who's worried about where their grade is, you can still achieve 100%, because for me, it's about you demonstrating that you've learned. And so what if the first time wasn't the best time? I don't consider that. Some key points. These are general comments directed to the whole class, even those who did well, just things to consider. Be explicit. Even my own exemplar lesson plan, I don't think would get 100% if I were going back and grading myself. By this, I mean, give 1 to 2 really great examples. Sometimes you would say the right things, that if I were interviewing you, theoretically, you're saying, yeah, formative assessment and summative assessment, and all those things are generally talked about. But if you go into a job interview without a specific and clear example of how you would do that, you won't get hired. The most common reason that people don't get hired is because they can't connect theory to practice. You need to be able to connect theory to practice when you're going into your interviews. You need to be able to connect theory to practice when you're in your classrooms. So be explicit. There are 2 ways you could do this. You could give 1 to 2 great examples, or you could just give it a paragraph explaining how you would get your idea out. 2, 3, 4 sentences. Be thorough. One of the common things I notice is stuff would be missing. And that happens. That's very common when you're designing your lesson plan, especially if it's the first time you're designing a topic. So be thorough. Assume nothing and include all resources. Oftentimes, and I corresponded with students when I found it, links were broken or links didn't work for me. You have to provide printouts. You can print to PDF now. Most websites and most documents you can print to PDF directly. Include those in your lesson plans when you're putting them together for your unit plan. Think ahead. I don't expect people to have the perfect lesson, but I do expect you to show me that you've thought of potential problems, that you're prepared. Prepared is not perfect, right? I make that clear distinction. I'm not expecting you to think of every situation, and don't stress yourself out trying to, because when you're in the classroom, you'll learn more than any planning could have done for you. But if you haven't planned, it'll be very clear when you go into the classroom and try and actually teach these things. So here's an example. A general comment I would have gotten is, "I'm going to walk around the room and give formative feedback." Walk around the room and give formative feedback. I saw that comment quite a bit. It recurred maybe a third of the time. On the right, I give an example of how that could be made much more specific. Formative feedback will be given in verbal comments to students. "I like the way you solved that equation. Maybe you need to rethink how you solved that particular equation." I did some formative feedback on the board. as you can see on the right. It has x plus 3 squared plus 1 equals y. I just circled it and said there's something missing. And then somebody went in and tried to fill it in. It looks like it's missing the middle term when you expand the binomial. The point is, that's formative feedback. I'm not telling them what's wrong specifically. I'm just saying you're missing something. Fill that in. That creates a learning opportunity. Also, I added on here, they would be given written comments, 1 comment per student. It's very specific. I now have a really clear idea of how you're going to give formative comments to your students. Accommodate for more time if students struggle. I saw that comment a lot too. Imagine the actual struggle that you think students will have with your particular topic and address it. I'm not saying address every struggle, I'm saying address 1, 2. Think about potential pitfalls in your own design in the topic you're teaching. And if you're not sure, just think about where you would get stuck. Because where you get stuck is probably where the student is getting stuck too. Especially for those of you who feel uncomfortable. You guys actually have an advantage over the rest of us. Those of us who feel comfortable. The hardest thing for me was learning how to accommodate learners who didn't learn it the way I learned it. That was the hardest thing. How do I accommodate someone who learns in a totally different way than I do? So, students may struggle with rearranging the equations. If they struggle, I would show the 3 laws of equations, and I would state them. And then I would say, okay, and work through the examples. It's not part of my lesson. I'm actually teaching them how to solve equations. But if they struggle, here's what you would do to address that. And you're showing some forethought. And again, I'm not expecting you to think of every potential pitfall. I don't even think that that's necessarily possible. But I do think that you can show and demonstrate how that happened. The 2 main areas where people struggled and did the worst in the lesson plan were in accommodation and in assessment. So we're going to be talking a lot and in depth today about assessment, but I wanted to give that. So before we go on, I'm just going to pause the recording here for questions. So this is related to my next slide and my next comment. This is not a math course, so I can't teach the curriculum. Right? Like, if you feel uncomfortable with where you're at with your math and your math knowledge, this course is a math pedagogy course, not a math course. So I can't cover all the way from grade 1 to 10 math. But what I can do is I'm willing to teach you your topic. You don't remember your topic, what you're learning, and you need someone to like reteach it to you so you feel comfortable enough to teach it. I'm willing to sit down and do that with each person, their specific topic, so that they feel comfortable. And I'm available to provide guidance in those potential pitfalls, but guide, not sage. What you're asking me to do is tell you where potential pitfalls are. And what I'm saying is you as an educator need to start thinking of where those potential pitfalls are. So let's say, for example, you make a guess and it's off course. That's okay. If in your write-up you make a guess of a potential pitfall, and I'm like, I don't think that that's actually going to be a problem. I'm not going to deduct you because you picked something that I don't think is a problem, right? So let's say we were doing 2-digit addition, right? Let's just pick that as the topic. And we're doing 2-digit addition, and you say, I think students are going to struggle with, decimal place. And I may say, yes, decimal place may be the problem. In addition, they may struggle with how to correctly line them up. But I might see a bigger problem carrying when it hits over 10, carrying the number over. So I may say that might be a bigger problem. And I might comment that in your evaluation. But in terms of this assessment, me assessing your ability to analyze a lesson plan and break it down, you would score top marks for selecting something that you thought was a problem and addressing it. Does that make sense? So I'm willing to guide you, but I'm not going to be the sage telling you explicitly, here's where it's going to go wrong. Part of that's because until I look at a topic, even I haven't really thought about all topics in math. I really haven't. Every time I approach a lesson, I'm asking in the back of my mind, where can this go wrong? That's what I'm asking myself. Where can this go wrong? To give you a general across all subjects, students are going to struggle when they are given something new. So every time they're doing something new, there's going to be struggle. Within that, I would focus your attention on the symbolism. Math is a lot of symbols. So if you're introducing a new part to the symbolic language of math, whether that's in equations and you're learning how to combine like terms, or whether we're talking geometry and it's learning how to write angle E plus angle F equals angle G, all of that is symbolic language, and they're going to struggle with it. So if I were to give you like a really quick, easy place to hunt for where the symbol is, what it means, and where the student's probably gonna misinterpret that. For example, are they gonna misinterpret 2x as 2 plus x? Or are they gonna misinterpret it as 2 to like x squared? Or are they gonna misinterpret it as 2 times x? All of those things are possible misinterpretations that could happen, and each one needs to be addressed differently. Does that help answer your question a bit? Okay, due to time constraints, it's very possible that we're not gonna get through everything, but I'm gonna do my best to cover this. If, at the end of today, you felt like it was fast, it's going to feel a bit rushed because we dedicated a lot more time to reclimatizing this course, because people have been feeling uncomfortable, right? So I wanna make sure that you feel comfortable stretching yourself. Okay, that said, I've got an activity for you. Fun little game. First, examples of assessment of learning. Let's just quickly rattle off 5 or 10 examples of what assessment of learning is to you. Raise your hand and share them with me. What do you got? Yes?
Test.
Test, great. What else?
Portfolio.
Portfolio, yes, great. What else? Essay, excellent. What else? Quiz, yes. What else? Presentations, yes. Let's keep stretching. Projects, yes. A lab, absolutely. Which one?
Some of them I consider formal.
It depends. You're right, it depends. What's the difference between all those things, right? We had essay, we had lab, we had presentations, etc. What's the difference between assessment of learning and assessment for learning?
Assessment of you're being evaluated for a mark, like for a grade.
Right. Assessment of learning, you're being evaluated for a grade. I'm going to give you an example related to your own personal life in this course. Everybody felt okay with their reflections until a number was thrown on it. And the moment a number was thrown on it, it was like cataclysmically different in week 4 when I read the class's reflections to week 3. Because suddenly your opinions, your thoughts were given a numerical value. And for many of you, you're like, huh? That doesn't connect. Assessment of learning has that impact in many cases. And what you're going to be seeing today is me showing you the differences of assessment as of and for learning and how they impact. Okay. What I want you to do is with a pen, scribbling, or your computer, or whatever, I just want you to give a mark to what you're going to see. You're going to see a student's performance on an EQAO examination. Hopefully it's a skill that you feel you understand. If it isn't, ask someone at your table to explain it to you, or ask me. Call me over and I'll explain it so you understand the nature of the question. Everyone ready? All you're doing is giving it a mark out of 10. That's all I'm asking you to do. A mark out of 10. And there's no wrong way to do this. I just want you to do it in the way that if this was your student, what would you do? Yep. So here are some fractions. 3/4, 18/25, 15/20, 75/100. And the question is, which fractions represent equal values? Okay, chat about it a little bit, but I don't want you to share the grade that you're going to give. You can develop an understanding of what the question is asking and develop an answer, but actually, we'll discuss the answer. What is the answer to this question? Let's discuss it as a class. What is equal to 3/4?
First, third, and fourth.
3/4 is the same as 18/25. Is it? No, it's not. Nope. Nope. It is the same as 15/20, right? Because that is 3/4 of 20, right? 5, 5, and 5. That's 3 5s, and there's 1 5 missing. Everybody understand 15/20 is the same as 3/4? Thumbs up if you get it. Good. Okay, 75/100. I hope you all recognize that one as 3/4. So that's the correct answer. Knowing the correct answer, I now want you to evaluate this student and what they've shown. Give them a mark out of 10. Write it down. We're going to move on. There's 4 of these that we're going to do. Give you like, I don't know, 30 seconds. And don't worry, we're gonna have time to discuss the marks that you're giving. I just want you to grade it. Does everybody feel like they've got a grade available for how this student did? Has everybody got that? Yes? Thumbs up if everybody's ready to move on. Okay, a couple more seconds. Alrighty, next one. So, what I'm gonna ask is, for someone who gave it a 1 or a 2 or a 3, I'd like you to give a justification why, and then I also wanna hear from someone who gave this a 4, 5, or 6. To volunteer, somebody who did a 1, 2, or 3, and why. Yep.
I give this kid a 3, and their process is not like mathematically anything that I've ever seen, so I don't really know where they're going or where they got this idea. But they clearly were working really hard and like trying to think through some process, whatever made sense to them.
Right.
So there's
Like the closest they got to mathematical thinking was making squares in color. They created a box and shaded it in. That's what that is referring to.
there's some rationale.
There's some
It's
rationale.
not like a fail bar, it's
Got
like
it.
a level 1, 0, 1.
Yeah. Okay, 4, 5, or 6. Somebody who gave it a 4, 5, or 6. Yes.
Obviously the student doesn't understand multiplication or division, they did subtraction instead.
Yep.
So obviously they don't understand that math concept, but I gave them a 5 out of 10 because at least they justified their answer.
So they provide some justification and you valued that a little more. Yeah. Was that just fixing or did you
No, I
have?
have more. I mean, I got what the student was getting at.
Mhm.
They broke down by unit,
Yeah.
and then they looked at what was left. So
Yeah.
each unit, they just didn't understand that each unit didn't have the same value.
Right. They just
And I liked that they actually justified their answer.
so you gave them a bit of a higher mark because they
Yeah,
provided
it's
some
6,
justification.
You can see where their thinking was going.
Excellent. And so here's what I'm going to say regarding everybody's feedback. Each of you is right about what the evaluation you just gave because you connected it and justified how you evaluated it. What wasn't clear is the way I asked the question. Give it a mark out of 10. It was so subjective that it wasn't clear what the expectations were. You just got this mark, right? Okay, next. Same question, different answer. I want you to grade this one too. By the way, these are actual submissions to EQAO by students in the grade 9 curriculum. Or grade 6, I'm not sure, might be a grade 6. Anyway, could be in either one. Has everybody got a grade?
Sorry, quick question.
Yes,
What are we grading them out of?
10.
Out of 10.
Yep, it's out of 10.
Oh, we're giving, do we have to give a grade out of 10 or can we give like a level grade?
Nope, out of 10. That's the instruction. Give it a mark out of 10. Is there only 3? How many people gave this one a 1 out of 10? 2 out of 10. 3 out of 10. 4. 5. 6. 7. 8. 9. 10. Okay, so it's a little more clear that these were centered around the middle. I think we had from 3 to 8 as the range, right? 3 to 8. I bet you if we went and asked around, we would hear similar reasoning. What is good about this description that they did? Let's talk about the good. Yes?
They showed their work with the multiplying.
They sure did. Yep, really clear, yes.
They're clearly demonstrating mathematical reasoning, they just didn't bring it all the way through.
Right, they missed one, right? They missed the 75 out of 100. So all of you recognized that that missing a piece was worth something. You disagreed on what it was worth, but you all agreed that it was worth less. Okay. Okay, next one. Next one. So you may have a hard time reading the student's handwriting, so I'll read it with you. These two represent equal values because you can multiply it and get the other number. Okay, everyone ready for the last one? Next one. How many people gave this a 1? 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6, good. 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay, obviously this one is a higher performing one. I would like to ask our 6 what your reasoning was for giving a 6.
I just said the numbers make sense, but the description is very vague. It doesn't make much sense.
Got it. So what they wrote numerically made sense, but their wording didn't. And you thought, wouldn't it have been better if they just didn't include their wording at all?
Probably.
Interesting. Yes,
But doesn't the QA will look for explanation, like in words and in numbers?
They do.
Part of the.
they do.
So you would need a proper.
You would need a proper in words description. Yep, generally. And generally that is good, right? That's part of communicating math and being able to communicate is being able to explain it in words. For those who gave a 10, how many of you felt like, well, it's pretty much there? Like 9s, 10s, right? It's pretty much there. Yeah, their wording could be a little better. Okay, let's do it. Oops. So what I'd like you to do is discuss at your table the different assumptions you made when you were assessing. What was valuable? What was the weight of the things that you determined had value? And what would you do differently? So chat amongst your groups, 2 minutes. With respect to this, what's the big idea that I'm trying to get at with this activity? What's the big idea from your discussion about value and weight and assessment? Yes?
Assessment is subjective.
Yes, assessment is subjective.
You want to have something in mind right off the bat so that while it's subjective, you want to be consistent.
Yes, while it's subjective, you do want to be consistent and grade everyone the same. But different learners have different needs and you have to accommodate. And that's tricky too. Fair isn't equal. And that's something to remember. Yes?
Nowadays, you pretty much have to have a justification for every grade.
Yes.
So doesn't that make the grade itself pretty much pointless?
I would say yes. In many ways, the grade loses meaning. And you can tell, I have a very clear position on how I feel about grades, which is the number is meaningless to me. It does not equal learning. How many of you have had it in your university life? We're going to talk only about your university life. In your university life, where you maybe did not do well in a course, numerically, but you learned a lot. I know I'm in that camp. Yeah, I had courses where I got C's, but learned a lot. Now, I'm going to flip the question. How many of you feel like you got A+ and learned nothing? Okay, right. Very good. I'm in that camp too. And that's where in this course, I'm trying to make that number equate to what you've been learning. What I'm looking at in this course is, have you learned something? Can you show me you've learned something? If you have, depending on where you are within Bloom's, shows me what level you get to. Everybody will pass. The minimum is 70, right? To pass a course. Everybody will pass if you meet the expectation. If you exceed the expectation, that's how you get to 100. And that was the expectation I laid out at the beginning. But you have to be clear about that as an instructor when you're doing assessment. You have to help that number have meaning to your students. But we're going to be talking a bit more about this as we continue. I could go on. Okay, rubrics are super important. It provides that consistency in your marking. It makes it defendable. You need to defend your mark. I have had a student, when I was teaching at private school, I had a student who was just quibbling over one little mark in a test where I didn't think they showed their work, and they thought they showed their work. And this is what happened. I sat down, I got called in by my department head, who was also the dean of the school. She sat me down, and I said, well, they didn't show their work, they didn't show their mathematical reasoning, and I'm not giving them the mark. And this is what she said to me. And this was a huge teaching moment, learning moment for myself. She said, why are you holding on to this mark like it's something special? Does it really matter? You want the student to learn, right? I said, yeah. They said, so make sure that they learn the idea that you're talking about. It has nothing to do with their mark. Give them the mark, who cares? That was her answer. And that forever changed the way I thought about grading from that point forward. I became a lot less stingy, a lot less strict. I used to be very, very hard on my marking, and very, very exact, and I thought it was like an actual thing, and then I changed. I realized that the mark isn't that important. General categories that are most important for rubrics. Most math people would agree showing your work is important. Do you guys agree? Showing your reasoning somehow? Yes. The answer. People generally think that the answer has some value, but when I teach, and I explain this, the answer is worth 10% of the total. The process is worth 90. That's how I evaluate. Show me your thinking, show me your work, and you will get a 90 if you can really clearly articulate. You don't even have to agree with me. I actually prefer if people disagree with me, because then I get an authentic voice. What I really hate is when I'm reading an assignment and all I feel like I'm getting is my words back at me. You guys know what I'm talking about? Where the students are just summarizing what you've been explaining to them and you don't feel like they've really been personalizing what you were teaching and connecting to it. That's when I really feel like they're not getting it. When they're getting it is when they can connect it, when they can show their work. The actual answer, the final product, isn't that important to me. Although some people would say the answer is very important. I was in courses where the answer was worth 100%. And how I got there wasn't important. Right? And I learned that expectation. So now I was only interested in getting the magic answer. I wasn't interested in my process anymore. And I learned that in that course for that instructor. Something I want to share with you when you're grading. Anyone try, most of you probably do additive marking, but has anyone here tried deductive marking? So I'll explain what deductive marking is. You start where everybody's perfect. And every time they miss something, you take one off. Potato, potato to me, which way you do it. I find deductive is easier when the student is a high performer. And I find additive easier when the student is a low performer. I'm searching for marks to give them, as opposed to searching for marks to take away. But really, all I'm trying to do with a grade is say, look at this, you missed something. That's all I really am trying to say. And sometimes when I give grades, I take away a mark. I purposely don't give them the top. Could I give them the top? Yes, but I purposely don't, because they see if they get a top, what happens when you get perfect on an assignment? Yeah, don't look it over. Oh, it's good, I did good. Don't need to learn from it. And I want them to learn from it, so I purposefully withhold one. I withhold one, I then include a lot of comments, informative, so that they then take a look at it. I know it's a little psychologically manipulative to do that. I recognize that. But I also recognize that the way people look at grades is psychologically manipulated to begin with. So I make use of that tool to achieve the goal that I'm looking for. Okay, this is going to be more like something you can include in your reflection. How are you as a person who does assessment? Think about it. Think about it with respect to your teachable subject, and I'd like you to also connect it to how would you do it in math? Connect it to how, what kind of a marker would you be and how? What criterion is important to you? That is really essential. If you want to reflect on that as your reflection topic for the week, that is a very valid and valuable insight that you'll gain from yourself. But really dig deep and identify what is important to you when you're grading. What are you really trying to do with this? What do you want the student to learn as a result of your assessment? Okay, assessment for learning. I really wanted to get to here. I'd like a brainstorm real quick. When have I given formative feedback to you in this course? Yes. After every reflection. What else? Yes. At the end of your lesson plans. Anywhere else? Every time you answer a question in class, I'm providing you feedback, right? Assessment for learning is also called formative assessment. There are comments, not grades. I've recently heard, and ministry approved, teachers who teach without grading. They provide 2 grades, one at the midterm, one at the final. That's it. And what they do is they look at objectives for the curriculum and they provide comments. And they have the student comment on what they thought they learned for that objective and how they thought they did. And then the instructor provides a comment for how they thought they did and how they thought they learned. If they match up, great. If they don't, what's the difference? Time to talk, time to discuss. Does that process sound familiar? That's the process I've been engaging with you since the beginning of this course. The process that feels really super uncomfortable, that makes you, why can't he just give me a number, right? I'm sure many of you were frustrated when that first came. Just be honest, show of hands. How many of you were frustrated that I didn't give marks every week for the reflection? Right? Because you've been expecting that and you've been trained to do that your whole teaching life, probably even in the faculty here. You've had that. But I've recently had my own pedagogical shift and I'm moving away from that. I no longer believe in that. And what's interesting is I did a little research. I dug in. Anyone heard of John Hattie? John Hattie? I'm going to be posting online, I'm going to be posting a little audio file that I'd like you to listen to. Okay? You can reflect just on this audio file and what he has to say. He's a very innovative, different thinker when it comes to assessment. And what he talks about is the power of feedback. Feedback has the single largest effect, and this has been quantitatively studied. What that means is factoring in everything. Give me some things that you think affect teaching. The teaching itself, yes, ranks very high. What else? The students in the class ranks very low in terms of its actual effect on the learning. Yes? Classroom environment has some effect. It's like 30% compared to 70% with formative. Formative feedback has that much power. What else? Other things that you think affect the learning environment. Yep.
Teacher enthusiasm.
Teacher enthusiasm actually has a huge impact. Teacher enthusiasm is one of the things John Hattie really communicates. Teachers' ability to teach and their passion for teaching the subject translate very far. The other big piece is this one right here. Yep.
Resource access.
Resource access, lower. It doesn't have as much. By the way, I give you the paper so you can look it up if you're interested, the academic in you. Yes?
Students feel safe and comfortable.
Yes, students need to feel safe and comfortable. What's interesting is how formative feedback can impact that process. Learning, the important thing when you're doing formative feedback is that students need to learn how or why. You need to learn how or why they misunderstand. Why are they not getting it? Where is their hang up in them getting the thing that you're trying to help them understand? It's also important for probing for depth. And I found this interesting. I'd like someone to read this aloud, so everyone, someone read it aloud. My voice is getting tired. Thank you.
The students with the more deep, critical, and passionate learning strategies have the highest probability of not completing university degrees.
What he said, the sentence before this one, which you don't hear, is he says, universities have taught people to go surface level only. Feel familiar with the reflections and where we started at the beginning of the course to where we're at now? I've had a huge revelation working with all of you. I really appreciate, by the way, that you guys are really working at it and trying and investing yourselves in the work. I'm seeing that as your instructor. I'm seeing the quality improve consistently from the beginning. You may not feel it. You may not see it yet. When your next mark comes back, maybe that'll help. But what he's talking about is that university students have learned how to get along. They've learned how to conform to whatever the whimsy of their current instructor is. I'm just going to adapt. I'm going to do whatever this instructor tells me. I'm not really going to focus on learning. I'm just going to focus on getting the grade, on surviving. And that results in not deep thinking. Those who are deep thinkers typically fail because universities and the way they're structured and the way that you're taught to learn is actually surface level learning. So for those of you who feel like you're struggling in learning how to be deep, it isn't your fault. I don't blame anyone for lacking the depth that I'm looking for, but I believe that everyone is capable of depth, and that takes time. When you're working with your own students in the high schools, are they capable of depth? Yes. Is it going to be easy to train them there? No. Because by the time you get them, if it's in grade 9, they've already had 9 years of schooling to tell them differently. And you have to untrain an old culture and retrain a new culture while also teaching curriculum. There are 3 essential feedback questions that you can use when you're working with students. This is, where's the student going? How am I going? Where to next? These are really powerful questions. He really expands on them a lot in the paper. I didn't get a chance to read it all. But these 3 questions really hit home to what is essential to that feedback process. So what he says about this feedback, this is what's interesting, is that there are 4 levels of feedback. Feedback about the task, what you actually did, the process, how you did it, your regulatory behaviors, how you chose to spend your time and resources, and lastly, your self levels. What's interesting is the one that is and this surprised me, self level is rarely effective. In other words, praising someone for being good just because they're good. You're a really great student. That actually worsens their ability to perform. It actually impedes their learning. The best things that work in terms of feedback is task feedback should be focused on faulty interpretations, not a lack of knowing. And if you've noticed, I've been really endeavoring to do that myself with your own reflections. I look and I'm like, I see where you thought that, but what if it was this way? Are you sure that the way you're thinking about it is the way that it is? Process feedback is beneficial because it helps students reject hypotheses. It helps them reject a thinking, a prediction that they have and come up with something new. And then it also can lead to regulatory feedback. So, like I mentioned, this to me is how I grade. And if you're worried about your grade in this course and you want to figure out what am I going for, it's about going from knowing to doing. You may know it, but if all you do is know it, that is not a pass. If you understand it and you're able to begin analyzing it, if you can analyze, you may not get to synthesizing, to creating new ideas, but if you can analyze, you will get 75%. So you will hit that pass that you're looking for if you can analyze. But if you can synthesize, create a new idea, and connect it in a specific way, that is the ultimate achievement that I'm looking for. Now, I've been clear about that. Well, I thought clear is a vague word. I have expressed that on numerous occasions. Am I going to have to express it many more? Yes. I've just accepted that that's just a part of teaching, that I have to repeat in many different ways the same ideas. Categories by the ministry are being phased out. TAC, knowledge, application, thinking, communication, this is being phased out. And the ministry is starting to move towards objective-based assessment, like I've been talking about. They will accept both. When you're out in your placements and you're designing your lesson plans, it's something to consider. These are alternative categories. Communication is in there. Knowledge is in here. Application is in here. You can rephrase it and repackage it in any way that you want. We've got a couple minutes left. In your groups, one of the things that's important for your unit plan is making sure that you include a description of your summative and formative assessments. So what I am expecting you to do is to take time to brainstorm those. If as a group or individual you're struggling and you're like, I need some help, what's great is I provide you with a list of all sorts of summative assessments. And the more creative you can get, the better. The better the student will feel, the better you will feel. It'll re-engage the curriculum for you, re-engage what you're covering, what you're talking about. But these are all different activities that could be done to summatively assess, to assess the learning and make sure that the learning happened. And these are examples of formatives. Everything from an essay, which by the way, all of the things that are summative can be flipped into formative. The difference is you just don't give a mark. You give comments. Imagine how different a test would feel if when a student did a test and all they got back were a bunch of comments and they had to do it again and again and maybe a fourth time just so that they felt like they understood it and can move on to the next topic. How different of a learning experience would that become? I realize that the last part I went a little fast. I will be posting these slides online. We've got a couple minutes, but I feel like I'm going to just wrap up early and give time if people want to chat individually to come forward and do so.